I cannot believe that it is April already this year. Where has this year gone? But also, I cannot believe that I have read 15 books this year already in the last 3 months. So come with me, let's talk about the books that I have read over the last 3 months. And this is the first quarterly review of the books that I've read for 2024. If you're new here, hi, my name is Kate and I love reading. On top of which, I'm also a part-time master's student at the University of Oxford, studying literature and arts, which is an interdisciplinary course. But I work full-time and am living in Ireland and just loving my life out here. But I read a lot. And if you also do, and you're interested in seeing the books that I read, which are generally more off the beaten track than I think most of the sort of, let's say, standard booktube, book talk kind of recommendations. So if you've been here a while, you know that I'm on a bit of a non-fiction, I don't even know what you would call it, like a non-fiction vibe at the moment. So I actually kicked off the year with 2 non-fiction books. The first one was The Hyacinth Girl by Lyndall Gordon. This is on my 2024 TBR, and it was the first book that I ticked off of my 2024 TBR. If you want to see what that's all about, I will leave a link and you can have a look at the books that I'm reading for my 2024 TBR. But I kicked off with The Hyacinth Girl. Again, if you don't know, I am a massive T.S. Eliot fan. I attend the T.S. Eliot conferences as often as I can, and I'll be going back to the T.S. Eliot conference in June, and I will obviously take you along with me. It's going to be held in Oxford this year, and I am so excited. And Lyndall Gordon will be there, which I'm just like fangirling over so hard right now. Essentially, this book is a initial review of the Eliot Hale letters, which I have spoken about before, and it's a really well written, really detailed sort of first look at these letters between T.S. Eliot and Emily Hale, and I just loved it. I thought it was such a good book. I'm so glad that I read it. I have so many notes in here. I don't know if you can see that. But anyway, I have so many notes in here. I've referred back to this book so many times. And I've actually been thinking about this book a fair bit in terms of like some of the research that I'm looking at for my master's at the moment. It's a bit outside of the time period that I'm looking at. This is modernism, and modernism isn't really my area of expertise, but I have just been thinking so much about these letters and so much about the implications these letters might have for parts of my research, but I am completely digressing. Is this a book for everyone? Absolutely not. If you are not an Eliot fan, then why would you read this? You wouldn't. You have no interest in it. If you are an Eliot fan, I absolutely would read this. It's so fascinating, such a great insight into that part of his life that until recently was lost to us. And I just loved reading this alongside reading some of the letters that he wrote to Emily Hale. They are just so poetic, so lyrical, so beautiful. And this really gives it a lot of context and insight into what was happening in Eliot's life at that time. So, if you're not a nonfiction reader, if you are not epistolatory reader, if you are not a modernist or poetry reader, this isn't for you. But if you are, you will love this because I loved it. Then, gosh. Wouldn't be a book video unless I dropped a book, right? Or a pile of books, as we have seen in the past. But I digress. The next book that I read that I actually recently wrote my master's paper on was Woman in the Picture by Catherine McCormack. This was absolutely brilliant. This book is about re-looking at art with a feminist kind of lens and claiming back the narratives of woman-subjected art and woman artists who have previously kind of been neglected or viewed in a particular manner that has been restrictive. And it's incredibly insightful, particularly with how we think about advertising even today, or it even talks about Beyonce, and it's super duper fascinating. And again, to preface, I am not an art historian. I'm just learning. I'm a beginner, and I found this really fascinating as a literature and arts student. It's not particularly long, but it's very engaging, very well written, and something I would highly recommend if you go to galleries and you're interested in looking at art, or if you just want to broaden your horizons at all. Highly recommend picking this book up. Again, it might not be for everyone. I totally get that. That's fine. I loved it. I would reread this. I probably will reread this because I think this is going to lend itself really nicely to my master's dissertation at a later stage. The next book that I read this year is a little bit of a chunky one. This is Paul Murray's The Bee Sting. This was nominated for the Booker Prize last year. I think it was shortlisted. It didn't win. Paul Lynch's Prophet Song won, but Paul Lynch and Paul Murray are both Irish authors, and I haven't read The Prophet Song yet. I have it upstairs. I'm desperate to read it. It's on my shelf to read this year still, but I had started this last year. I started it last year and I put it down because it's a absolutely brilliant novel. Let me just explain why I ended up putting it down for a bit. It's a story about a family within a small Irish town who is dealing with a whole lot of secrets that each member of the family keeps: a mother, a father, a daughter, and a son. And the book is broken up into each of the family members' narratives, and you get their perspective of things and what's going on in their life. And the first narrative here is the teenage daughter. Now, I don't know if it's because I am a bit older or what the case was, but I found her narrative very difficult, mainly because I just maybe couldn't relate to it. I couldn't get on board with it. I felt like she was so bratty, which I think is good. It means that the writing that Paul Murray is doing is really phenomenal. But it irritated me so much that I actually put the book down for a while. The character itself irritated me so much that I ended up putting the book down. All the other narratives I actually found were really engaging and really good, particularly the mother's narrative. I thought Imelda's narrative was just really fantastic in this book, and when I started that, I just breezed through it because she was so engaging. So I really enjoyed this. The ending was my favorite. It kind of ended on a little bit of a cliffhanger. I suppose that's the purpose of this kind of book, but I struggle with endings as it is. I don't read a lot of books where I really get on board with the ending. This book was no exception. I didn't particularly like the ending. But overall, I'm really glad that I read it. And if you are looking for something that is based in Ireland, is about sort of an Irish family and the Irish family dynamics, I would highly recommend picking this up. It is really engaging. And I know a few people who I've spoken to about this book really loved it. And I liked it. I don't like giving ratings for books. This would probably be like a 3 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5 for me, because I thought the writing was really good and the characterization was really good. The pacing was a bit off. It kind of started slow, moved. I don't know. It just maybe didn't feel 100% right, but I think that was the point of the book in and of itself. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to stop. But I enjoyed it. I think this book that I'm about to show you is my first 5-star. As I just said, I don't give star ratings, but this book is definitely one of the best books that I have read in 2024. and it is part of my absolutely ginormous reads of this year, as you can see. It's massive. I think it's about 1,000 pages long, or just short of 1,000 pages long. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to tackle this book. I've got another really big book that's on my 2024 TBR that I'm tackling. I'll start this book in January and work my way through it over the next 6 months. I think I started this book mid-January. I finished it within a month. And that was slow because I was actually listening to the audiobook. I read a lot quicker than I would listen to the audiobook. But I listened to the audiobook of this and I was so enthralled by this book. Also, if you know me, I'm going to put this down because it's heavy. I'm not a big audiobook person, but every now and again I find an audiobook that just is perfect. Absolutely perfect. And the audiobook for this was insane. The narrator was perfect. Absolutely perfect. I loved the way that he varied his tone of voice. He varied his characterizations for each of the characters. There's a lot of characters in here. He did such a phenomenal job about that. I really felt so engaged to a point that I would put my audiobook on. I put my headphones on, I put my audiobook on to clean the dishes at night. And I'd end up cleaning the whole house because I just did not want this audiobook to stop. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. It's set in New Zealand during the gold rush era in New Zealand, in a small town in New Zealand. And it's surrounding the mysteries of a supposed murder of one of the patrons of the small town. And it's attributable to one of the ladies of the night, which they love that phrase. There's plenty of mystic elements in this book. There's all kinds of secrets and little tidbits of the characters that come out in this book while you're reading it. And I was enthralled from the get-go. What I do really love about this book, I won't be able to show it to you now, but what I do love about this book is that the events are tracked to like a star map. So each of the chapters that you read, for example, well, most of the chapters, not all of them. Now I can't find a chapter. That's not a good example. So some of the chapters are titled Moon Rises in Virgo. And it's really interesting. Apparently, if you know more about astronomy and astrology, there are links between what happens, the events that happen to the characters in the book, to whatever is being traced in the stars. And I find that completely fascinating. Obviously, I didn't understand it. I didn't have enough knowledge about it. But if I had more time to kind of decode this book, I absolutely would. And maybe it will be on the next read because I definitely feel like I want to reread this book. But it was really and truly amazing, and definitely one that will appear on my best books of 2024. I didn't even talk about the title. This is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. I just went straight into how great this book was. I can't believe I didn't talk about what the book is. That was a bit silly of me. Anyway, nevertheless, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Would recommend to anyone. Anyone. I've got 2 books that I read on my Kindle. I'll put covers here. But for many of you that have recommended this book to me, I finally read Fourth Wing. I read it in a day. It was very engaging. I really liked the storyline. The whole plot twist at the end, I'm sorry to say I saw it coming, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very, very engaging. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's so spicy. It's so spicy. I was like, okay, that's nice. I've read spicier. But, you know, whether that's a reflection on me and, you know, my fanfic reading from the past, But I did really, really enjoy it, and I am looking forward to seeing the next one come out, which I think is coming out like soon-ish. I did really enjoy it. I did enjoy it. I loved the dragons. The dragons were my favorite part of this book. The characters were cool, yeah, whatever, but the dragons were my favorite part. I also read, straight after Fourth Wing, I ended up reading A Touch of Darkness. So this was a retelling, a modern retelling of the story of Hades and Persephone. Did I have some issues with this book? Yes, absolutely I did. There's a few things in there where I was like, no, this isn't great. But was it a fun retelling? Yes. Is it the kind of retelling where I'm going to go out and buy the second, third, fourth, fifth book in the series? Absolutely not. I can see why people would like it. It makes sense to me. It's just not my vibe. Thank you. It was fun. I'm good. So I'll move right along from those. Intermittently, I need those kind of like romancy, spicy books just to break up the seriousness that is my reading list. But it's not, I can't do it all the time. Definitely can't do it all the time. Especially because I can't do it all the time when there's books like this that I read. This is the Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams. I picked this up while I was in Oxford. I cried so much in this book. Not necessarily because it is sad, even though there are some aspects of this book that are very, very sad. But there is just so much emotion in this book. It's set in Oxford. It's based around the character of Esme, and Esme's father works with the first team that pulls together the Oxford English Dictionary. What I loved about this book, it's a historical fiction. Obviously, the characters are fictional, but a lot of the characters and a lot of the circumstances and a lot of the facts and dates and all that kind of stuff are 120% accurate. This is based on what happened in Oxford, in Jericho, when the dictionary was being put together. And a lot of the words that were left out of the dictionary, which is effectively what this book is about, were left out for particular purposes. And this book really questions that. It takes it from a feminist lens, but also the words that were put into the dictionary were decided on by sort of the elite upper class group, and a lot of the words that were excluded were the works of the sort of lower to middling classes. And I think it's so important to critique some of those events that we've had in history. There was so much in this book to discuss. I loved it. I loved it so much. I think I finished this within like 24 or 30 hours. I just breezed through this book. It is so incredible. And I finished it on the bus on the way to the airport when I was coming home from Oxford. It was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning because I caught the early bus. And I was sitting there, I was reading this book, and it ended and I just started crying. I was on the bus, I cried. It was truly, truly an emotional time. But this is another book that I 120% will be claiming as one of my top books of 2024. If you're interested in historical fiction, please pick this up. I think you'll really, really enjoy it. I know she has another one called The Bookbinders of Jericho. I would love to get that. I'll look into getting it in my next book buying session. I'm trying really hard, you guys, not to buy books. I have been sent a few, which I obviously really, really appreciate, but I'm really trying not to buy books unless it is necessary for me to do so. Okay, I need to hurry up because this video is already starting to look really long. I don't know. Do you guys like long videos? Do you like me just talking randomly about books? If you do, please let me know. I would like to know that because, I mean, I can talk more. I feel like I'm breezing through this, but apparently I'm not. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Another 2 books that were on my 2024 TBR. This is Selby, Wynn, Schwartz After Sappho, and the Sappho poems Stung with Love, Poems and Fragments. This book was written based on some of the poetry fragments that you find in this book. So what I decided to do was read them together. In this book, which is essentially like a historical fiction side of symphonic woman in history, like Virginia Woolf, for instance, who took Sappho's poems and drew inspiration from Sappho's poems in their expressions of art and love. And it's really quite phenomenal. Is this a book that I would reread? Probably not. And let me explain why. It's not because I didn't enjoy it, because I absolutely did. But what I found difficult, and I suppose what makes these poems difficult to read and embrace and understand, is that they are so fragmented. We have so little history of the poet Sappho from Greek history, and the poems that we have are these little fragments of poems, and even these little fragments are so powerful, but they're only a glimpse into what we actually have. And Sappho's history in and of itself is very sort of clouded. We don't have a lot, and that sense is really reflected in this book itself. It kind of jumps between characters, it jumps between storylines. The narrative structure isn't necessarily linear. There's sort of this dissolving between reality and thoughts and experiences, history, all this kind of stuff, and it jumps around a lot. And for that reason, there were parts of this book that I absolutely loved and I breezed through so quickly. Like the parts where Virginia Woolf was a big component, like I loved those. The earlier kind of parts, I really struggled to get on top of this changing narrative structure, the variety of characters that are in here. It's all just a bit chaotic, but I think that's the point. I think it's the point that it's meant to be chaotic, because it's meant to emulate what we have in the poetry itself. Nevertheless, I think it is a great book to read, especially if you're a poetry lover. If you're a poetry lover and you've never read why don't I put it the right way around? You've never read Sappho's poems, please go and read them. I think you'll really love them. I think they're absolutely fantastic. The next book, oh, and by the way, both of these were, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but if I have, I'll edit this out. Both of these were on my 2024 TBR list. I've read them now, I can tick them off. Another one that was on my 2024 TBR list, and that was a buddy read on the Sunbeam's Jess book club, was Paradais by Fernanda and McCall. Guys, you want a dark book? This is it. This is very psychologically dark and disturbing. Kind of disturbing. It centers around the character Polo, who is a gardener in one of these wealthy estates, and befriends one of the teenagers in the estate who is just this sort of really sick and twisted minded guy who has developed an unhealthy obsession with one of the married women in the estate. And it really explores the sort of dark sides of our thoughts and what can happen if those dark thoughts and those feelings are fed. It was absolutely incredible. It was so brilliantly written. It was so atmospheric. The narrative structure was fantastic. The pacing was fantastic. I thought it was such an excellent example of a book. And it's not very long. As you can see, it's really easy to kind of get through. It is quite disturbing though. At the end, I will warn you about that. It is very disturbing. But I think it's a great example of a great piece of writing and a great piece of translated writing, because remember, this is also translated. It's a very typical Fitzcarraldo type of story. This will not leave you. This will enter your thoughts consistently, as it has with mine, but really brilliant. Really brilliant. If you're a literary scholar or even just an advocate for some really good reading, or you want something that's a bit dark and twisted, this is it. Really good. Okay guys, we're almost done. I'm sorry. I know this video is long. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. Guys, this book has my heart. In typical Hardy fashion, just FYI, if you've read any of Hardy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe Far from the Maddening Crowd, but definitely like Tess the D'Urbervilles. But in true Hardy fashion, he breaks your heart. He absolutely breaks your heart. And he breaks your heart with this. Jude is just... what a character. What a story. But so, so heartbreaking at the end. But guys, I absolutely love this. This is a classic. It's a classic for a reason. The intellect that Hardy must have had to have written this book, it's far ahead of its time as well when it's written. And he acknowledges that. He acknowledges that in this book, in the characters. The ideas that he's purporting are ideas that are even a bit scary for some people today. And yet he explores human nature in such a phenomenal, phenomenal way. And Jude's love of learning and reading is just something that I relate to so much. His questioning of religion and all of that is just something that I just think is so brilliantly reflected in this book. So if you are a classics nut, you haven't read Jude the Obscure, please read it. I think you'll really, really enjoy it. Another insanely disturbing book, but oh my goodness, so atmospheric. This is Where I End by Sophie White. This is a Tramp Press book. I've spoken about Tramp Press all the time. Love them so much. Damn. I was worried that this book would be disturbing. It is so disturbing. It is so twisted and disturbing. But it has not left my thoughts. I have thought about this book and I've thought back to the imagery and I've thought back to the themes of motherhood, the themes of nature, the themes of good versus bad. It's just, there's so much going on in such a small space that it is just truly phenomenal. Truly a phenomenal book. If you guys like a good thriller, I think this isn't really a thriller. Let me just preface that. This isn't really a thriller novel. It's creepy. It's disturbing. There are a few things if you've read this book, you know what I mean? Like the paper cuts. No, it's gives you that, that creepy feeling. But I don't know if I'm going to keep that in the video, but anyway. Tramp Press, they never miss a beat. I would highly recommend that. If you liked We've Always Lived in the Castle, if you like any of these kind of dark kind of books, yes, I would definitely recommend that. And staying on the Tramp Press train, I got this advanced reader's copy of Old Romantics by Maggie Armstrong and another Tramp Press book. My friends at Tramp Press, thank you so much. I love you guys. But this is being released on the 18th or the 19th of April. I can't remember exactly when, but I will be going to the book launch of this book. This is a collection of short stories that kind of all intermingle into one. And again, it explores these very grey sides of our thoughts that we don't necessarily feel comfortable admitting to. And yet we do have these thoughts. We all have these thoughts. And Maggie Armstrong lays them out so clearly in her book, in these little short stories, in collections of sort of harrowing but very raw and emotional experiences that feel crazily relatable. And probably at some point we don't even want them to be relatable, but they are relatable because so many people have felt what the characters are feeling in this book. And I think the fact that they are collected into these little short stories makes the book so interesting to engage with and makes you kind of wonder about the episodes in your life as short stories. Well, at least that's what I've felt. We're still on the Irish train, by the way, because bar Jude the Obscure, I read 4 Irish books, or four books by Irish authors, and I absolutely love them. So Where I End, Old Romantics, and Beautiful World, Where Are You? and one other which we'll get to. But okay, I know the internet is divided by Sally Rooney. You either love her or you hate her. I get it either way, but I'm just going to come out and say it that I love her. I absolutely love her. I read Normal People in a day and I've reread it a couple of times. I really enjoyed that. And I did not think it could get better than Normal People, but I was wrong. I don't know why I didn't pick up this book earlier, but oh my goodness me. Beautiful World, Where Are You? Maybe it's because like I'm in the same phase of life as Alice and Eileen, the two friends in this book. I don't know, but I just found this book absolutely phenomenal. In so many ways. So many ways was this book phenomenal. I liked that it was kind of a modern take on the epistolary novel with the emails going back and forth between the friends. The close friendship that Alice and Eileen have rings quite true to me with a lot of the friendships that I have with my friends, especially in some of the conversations that they have with each other where they talk about things like the Byzantine Empire or communism or something like that. And those kind of random conversations, I feel like I have those with my friends all the time. And it was really, really insightful. I want to reread this book again. I did read it and listen to it because I didn't want to carry too many books while we were on our road trip. So I did listen to part of this and I really loved the audiobook of this. I can't wait to reread this book. Like, I just want to pick it up again and start reading it again. I just loved it so much. If you like Normal People, you will like Beautiful World, Where Are You? And if you are looking to get into Sally Rooney, I would try this. I would absolutely try Beautiful World, Where Are You? And quite frankly, if I was to write a book, it's this kind of book that I would write. This kind of narrative structure, this kind of intruding of thoughts into a narrative so that the narrative itself, the story itself, the plot itself is so much richer than just a story about a boy and a girl and a boy and a girl. Like this, I love this book so much. Another best reads of 2024. So far there have been 3 out of this list. Yes, 120%. This would be a best reads of 2024. Finishing up with this little book. This is Clair Keegan's Foster. I read Small Things Like These, and then in the last an hour and a half of the road trip, I downloaded the audiobook for this and I finished it just before we finished our road trip. Clair Keegan is just absolutely phenomenal when it comes to short stories. I feel like this kind of writing, this short story writing that Clair Keegan does, that Catherine Mansfield does, is so brilliant. It's so difficult to create so much background, so much atmosphere in such a small space. Such a small space. Look how tiny this book is. How many pages is it? This book is 88 pages long. You could read this in an hour. You could read it in a night. It's so easy to pick this up and read it. What I do like about Clair Keegan, and she didn't do it so much in this book, she did it a lot in Small Things Like These, but a lot of Irish history happened on the edges of these books. Maybe Small Things Like These, it's a bit more prevalent, but there are parts of these books that she writes where she'll bring in things that almost make the story itself real, because she so carefully considered how the ordinary person would react to the news. And for example, she brings in here the hunger strikes that are happening at the time, and it's so subtle, it's so small, and you probably wouldn't even really notice it unless it's something you're looking out for. And that's something that I really love about her writing, the way she situates these great stories, these really, really phenomenal stories about ordinary people within a very, very realistic setting. And I'm just floored, absolutely floored by the way that she writes. Would this be one of my top books of 2024? It might be. It's actually really close to being. Small Things Like These was absolutely phenomenal. This is absolutely phenomenal. If you're even thinking of getting into the slightest amount of Irish literature, Clair, Keegan, or anything by Tram Press or Sally Rooney. They're all different vibes though, right? They're all different kind of things. But anyway, now I'm rambling and this video is really, really long. So I'm going to call it quits over here. I have got so many books still left on my 2024 TBR. I'm not sure I'm going to make my 2024 TBR this year, but we shall see. We'll see how we get on. I've also received some really great books, as I said, in the mail from publishing houses, and I really appreciate that. And there's so many great books that are coming up on prizes. I'm hoping to go to the Dublin Literary Festival Prize, which is later on this month. Republic of Consciousness Prize is happening, I think, today. Is it today? I think it's happening today, or it happened yesterday. That's happening. There's so much happening in terms of prize winners that I'm looking forward to seeing. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you guys soon.